Officer Rodriguez stepped out of his patrol car, his weathered face already showing the exhaustion of someone who dealt with too many neighborhood disputes. Behind him, 2 more units arrived, followed by a fire department hazmat truck that seemed comically oversized for the quiet suburban street. "Which one of you called about the chemical emergency?" Rodriguez asked, his eyes moving between Marcus and Karen, who was still sitting on the porch steps, looking like she'd seen a ghost. Karen struggled to her feet, her earlier bravado crumbling but not quite dead. "Officer, I'm Karen Henderson, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. This man," she pointed at Marcus with a trembling finger, "has been conducting illegal chemical experiments that have contaminated our neighborhood." Rodriguez looked at the pink pool, then back at Karen. "Ma'am, that looks like dye. It's a chemical reaction," Karen insisted, her voice rising to a pitch that made several neighbors peek out from behind their curtains. "I've researched this extensively. The pink coloration is caused by excessive chlorine interacting with copper sulfate. The toxic fumes could be affecting children for miles around." Marcus watched Officer Rodriguez's expression shift from professional interest to barely concealed irritation. In his 15 years testifying in court, Marcus had learned to read law enforcement like a book. Rodriguez was already 3 steps ahead of Karen's amateur performance. "Sir," Rodriguez turned to Marcus, "I'm going to need to see some ID and get your version of events." Marcus handed over his driver's license and business card. "I'm Dr. Marcus Chen, forensic chemist with the State Crime Lab. I discovered my pool had been vandalized this morning around 7 a.m. The water contains fabric dye, writ all-purpose dye, in what appears to be their fuchsia fantasy color." Rodriguez examined the business card, his eyebrows raising. "Slightly forensic chemist. 15 years. I specialize in trace evidence analysis, including chemical identification." Marcus gestured toward his pool. "I can tell you with certainty that this is not the result of any pool chemicals. The pH would be completely different. The water would have a chlorine odor, and there would be precipitate formation. This is pure fabric dye." Karen's face flushed red. "He's lying. He's trying to cover up his negligence with fancy scientific terms." "Ma'am," Rodriguez said, his patience clearly wearing thin, "I need you to calm down and let me conduct my investigation." A fire captain approached, carrying a water testing kit. "Officer, we've run preliminary tests on the pool water. No hazardous. Chemicals detected. pH is normal. No chlorine gas emissions. This appears to be food grade or fabric dye." The color drained from Karen's face again, but she doubled down. "That's impossible. I know what I saw. The chemical reaction must have neutralized by now." Marcus pulled out his phone. "Officer Rodriguez, I'd like to show you something that might clarify the situation." "What kind of something?" "Security footage from last night. 4 cameras. Motion activated. Recording in 1080p, Karen made a strangled sound that might have been a protest." But Rodriguez was already following Marcus toward his garage, where a small security monitor was mounted on the wall. "The incident occurred at 3:47 a.m., Marcus said, queuing up the footage. "Camera 3 has the best angle." The screen flickered to life, showing a crystal-clear view of Marcus's backyard. The timestamp read 3 hours, 47 minutes, and 23 seconds a.m. A figure in a dark, hooded sweatshirt crept along the fence line, carrying what appeared to be a shopping bag. "That's not me," Karen blurted out, having followed them despite Rodriguez's instructions to stay put. "Ma'am, please step back," Rodriguez ordered. On screen, the figure reached the pool's edge and began pulling bottles from the bag. Under the motion sensor lights, the person's face was clearly visible as they looked around nervously before unscrewing the first bottle cap. It was unmistakably Karen Henderson. The footage showed her dumping 8 bottles of bright pink liquid into the pool, stirring the water with a long-handled pool skimmer, and then carefully collecting the empty bottles and placing them back in the bag. The entire process took 12 minutes. "Jesus Christ," Rodriguez muttered. Karen's voice came out as a whisper. That's not what happened. Someone must have edited that footage." "Deep fake technology. You can't trust digital evidence." "Any more?" Marcus turned to face her, his expression deadly calm. "Karen, I work in forensics. I know digital evidence law better than most attorneys. This footage is admissible in court, complete with metadata proving its authenticity." But I was trying to help," Karen stammered, her story shifting again. I thought maybe if I could prove how dangerous your chemicals were, you'd finally listen to reason about pool safety. Rodriguez stepped forward. Ma'am, are you confessing to vandalizing Mr. Chen's property? No. I mean, it wasn't vandalism. It was a public service. I was trying to demonstrate the dangers of improper pool maintenance. By dumping dye in his pool at 4 a.m. Karen's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. I didn't think it would be permanent. I thought the chlorine would neutralize it. Marcus felt a cold smile spread across his face. Karen, you've just admitted to 3 separate crimes on body camera footage: trespassing, vandalism, and filing a false police report. But you've also given me something much more valuable. What? Evidence of premeditation. You planned this. You researched it. You bought the materials. You waited until the middle of the night. You brought tools to mix the dye properly. This wasn't a prank. This was a calculated attack designed to frame me for environmental crimes. The fire captain approached Rodriguez. Officer, we've finished our assessment. No environmental hazard. The homeowner will need to drain and refill the pool, but there's no public safety risk. Rodriguez nodded, then turned back to Karen. Ma'am, I'm placing you under arrest for vandalism, trespassing, and filing a false police report. Wait, Karen's voice cracked. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I was protecting our neighborhood. You were breaking the law, Rodriguez said, pulling out his handcuffs. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. As Rodriguez read Karen her rights, Marcus watched neighbors emerging from their houses. Mrs. Patterson, who'd looked at him with fear an hour ago, now stood in her driveway with her arms crossed, shaking her head in disgust at Karen. Mr. Kowalski, who'd been on the phone earlier, was now talking to other neighbors, gesturing angrily in Karen's direction. The same woman who'd tried to destroy his reputation was now being led to a patrol car in handcuffs, in full view of the entire neighborhood. Dr. Chen Rodriguez said, walking back after securing Karen in his vehicle, "You'll need to file a formal complaint at the station. Given the cost of pool remediation and the false emergency response, this is looking at felony charges." Marcus nodded. Officer, there's one more thing. As HOA president, Karen has access to everyone's personal information addresses, phone numbers, financial records from dues, payments, given her willingness to commit crimes to target me. I'm concerned about what she might do to other residents who've crossed her. Rodriguez's expression darkened. We'll be looking into that. Document everything, Dr. Chen. Something tells me this is just the beginning. As the police cars pulled away with Karen in custody, Marcus surveyed his pink pool one more time. The cleanup would cost thousands, but watching Karen's world collapse in real time had been worth every penny. His phone buzzed with a text from his lab partner, saw the news about the pool. Need help with evidence analysis? I know a guy who owes me a favor at the DA's office. Marcus smiled, typing back, that would be perfect. I have a feeling we're going to need all the help we can get, because if 15 years in forensics had taught him anything, it was that people like Karen never operated alone. And now that she was cornered, she was about to become very, very dangerous. Marcus had barely finished his morning coffee when his doorbell rang at 7:30 a.m., exactly 24 hours after Karen's arrest. Through the peephole, he saw a woman in an expensive navy suit holding a briefcase, flanked by 2 men in matching black polos, who looked like they'd stepped out of a private security catalog. Dr. Chen? The woman's voice carried the kind of authority that came with billable hours exceeding most people's annual salaries. I'm Victoria Blackwood, attorney for Ms. Henderson. We need to discuss your recent accusations against my client. Marcus opened the door, but didn't invite them in. Ms. Blackwood, your client was arrested based on video evidence of her committing multiple crimes. There's nothing to discuss. Actually, there's quite a bit to discuss. Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. My client has been released on bail, and we've discovered some very interesting information about your ... background. One of the men stepped forward, pulling out a tablet. Dr. Chen, is it true that you were involved in the Martinez case 3 years ago, the one where your testimony was called into question? Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Martinez case had been a nightmare domestic violence murder, where defense attorneys had tried to discredit his DNA analysis. Every test had been verified, every procedure documented. But the media had painted it as forensic science under fire for 6 months. My testimony was validated by 3 independent labs, Marcus said carefully. The conviction was upheld. On appeal, but the media attention was significant, Victoria continued. And now you're living in a quiet suburban neighborhood, trying to keep a low profile. It would be unfortunate if that attention returned. The threat was delivered, with the casual precision of someone who destroyed reputations for a living. Ms. Blackwood, are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality, Dr. Chen. My client made a simple mistake, a momentary lapse in judgment during a stressful period. She's willing to pay for your pool cleaning and issue a public apology. In exchange, you drop all charges and we all move on with our lives. Marcus looked at the 3 people on his porch, recognizing the formation. Victoria was the frontline attacker, smooth and professional. The 2 men were psychological, pressure-silent intimidation, designed to make him feel outnumbered and vulnerable. And if I refuse, Victoria's smile widened. Then we'll be forced to mount a vigorous defense. We'll subpoena your personnel, files, examine every case you've ever worked, interview every colleague who might have concerns about your methods. The Martinez case was just the beginning, Dr. Chen. Forensic scientists have such complicated professional lives. The second man stepped forward. We've already spoken with several of your neighbors. Interesting conversations. Mrs. Patterson mentioned that you work unusual hours, sometimes coming home very late with equipment in your vehicle. Mr. Kowalski said, "You've been asking questions about the neighborhood's security systems," Marcus felt his jaw clench. They were building a narrative, twisting innocent details into something sinister. You're building a case based on lies. We're building a case based on perspective, Victoria corrected. The same evidence can tell many different stories, can't it? That's something you'd know better than most. Marcus's phone buzzed. A text from his lab partner. Emergency. Call me now. If you'll excuse me, Marcus said, stepping back toward his door, of course. But Dr. Chen, Victoria's voice stopped him. My client has many friends in this community. The HOA board is very concerned about the negative publicity this incident has generated. They're meeting tonight to discuss potential ... assessments for residents who bring unwanted attention to our neighborhood. After they left, Marcus immediately called his partner, Dr. Sarah Kim. Marcus, we have a problem. Sarah's voice was tight with anxiety. Someone called the lab this morning claiming to be a journalist, asking about your work on the Martinez case. Then they started asking about your current caseload, your access to chemicals, your mental health. Someone's trying to build a character assassination. It gets worse. Director Walsh wants to see you in his office at 2 p.m. He's gotten calls from concerned citizens, questioning whether someone involved in such a volatile neighborhood dispute should have access to evidence in active cases. Marcus felt that walls closing in. Karen's arrest had been just the opening move. Now her legal team was systematically dismantling his life, using his own expertise against him. Sarah, I need you to do something for me. Pull the property records for everyone on the HOA board. I want to know who owns what, who has connections, to whom, and who might be funding a legal defense this sophisticated. You think there's more to this? A fabric dye prank doesn't warrant a legal team that costs $5,000 a day. Someone with serious money is backing Karen Henderson. That afternoon, Marcus sat in Director Walsh's office, watching 15 years of career building crumble in real time. Marcus, I'm not questioning your abilities, Walsh said, his tone suggesting the opposite. But the lab has to maintain public confidence. When our staff members become the subjects of criminal investigations, I'm not the subject of a criminal investigation. I'm the victim of vandalism. That's not how Channel 7 News reported it this morning. Walsh turned his computer screen toward Marcus. The headline read, Forensic Scientists' Pool Chemicals Cause Neighborhood Panic. The story was a masterpiece of selective editing. Karen's arrest was mentioned only briefly, while the bulk of the article focused on Marcus's unusual work hours, his access to dangerous chemicals, and concerns from neighbors about his secretive behavior. They're making me look like a mad scientist, Marcus said, scanning the article. They're making the lab look bad by association. I'm putting you on administrative leave pending the resolution of this matter. Marcus stared at his boss of 8 years. Jim, you know me, you know my work, you know this is character assassination. I know the mayor's office called this morning asking why we employ someone who can't manage his own household chemicals. I know the county commissioner wants a full review of our hiring practices. I know that 3 defense attorneys have already filed motions to exclude your testimony from upcoming trials. Walking to his car, Marcus felt the weight of Karen's strategy settling on him like a shroud. She hadn't just vandalized his pool. She hadn't just vandalized his pool. She'd declared war on his entire life. His phone rang. "Sarah, Marcus, you need to hear this. I ran those property records. Karen Henderson doesn't just live in your neighborhood. She owns 4 rental properties there. Her husband is a silent partner in the construction company that built half the subdivision. And here's the kicker. The HOA president's salary. It's $50,000 a year, plus bonuses for special assessments and neighborhood improvements. She's been using the HOA as a personal ATM. It gets better. Remember the Martinez case? The defense attorney who tried to discredit you? Thomas Brennan. He's Victoria Blackwood's law partner." Marcus felt the pieces clicking together. This isn't about the pool. This is about revenge, and it's about to get worse. I just saw the HOA meeting agenda for tonight. They're voting on a special assessment for neighborhood reputation management, specifically targeting residents who bring negative attention to property values. Marcus looked at his house, his pool, his quiet suburban dream, and realized that Karen Henderson had just taught him the most expensive lesson of his life. Sometimes the real criminals wear business suits and carry briefcases, but she'd also made one critical mistake. She'd forgotten that Marcus Chen didn't just analyze evidence, he created it. And tonight, he was going to give her something that would destroy her more completely than she'd ever imagined possible. Marcus spent the afternoon in his home office, surrounded by printouts, financial documents, and 3 laptops running different analysis programs. If Karen wanted to play with evidence, she was about to discover what happened when you challenged someone who lived and breathed forensic investigation. Sarah arrived at 5 p.m., carrying 2 boxes of documents and a grim expression. "I've got everything you asked for, but Marcus, this is bigger than we thought. Karen Henderson isn't just skimming from the HOA, she's been running a full-scale fraud operation." Marcus looked up from his computer screen, where he'd been tracking financial patterns. "Show me." Sarah spread the documents across his dining table. Property records going back 10 years. Karen and her husband have been buying distressed properties, having them condemned by the city, then purchasing them through shell companies at rock-bottom prices. Guess who sits on the City Planning Commission? Her husband, Better. Her brother-in-law, David Morrison. He's also the building inspector, who signs off on all the emergency repairs that justify the special assessments. Sarah pulled out a highlighted spreadsheet. In the past 5 years, Willow Creek residents have paid over $200,000 in special assessments. Guess what they funded? Marcus studied the numbers. Property improvements on houses the Hendersons owned, new roofs, driveways, landscaping, all paid for by HOA fees. All performed by companies owned by Karen's extended family. They've been using the Homeowners Association as their personal construction fund. Marcus felt his anger crystallizing into something far more dangerous: professional focus. What about the legal team? Victoria Blackwood's firm has been the HOA's legal counsel for 3 years. They've filed dozens of liens against residents who questioned the assessments. Mrs. Chen from Oak Street, they foreclosed on her house when she couldn't pay a $15,000 emergency roof repair assessment. Jesus Christ, it gets worse. Remember how fast they responded to your situation? They have a standard playbook. Anyone who threatens their operation gets the full treatment: character assassination, legal harassment, financial ruin. You're not their first target, Marcus. You're just the first one with the skills to fight back. The doorbell rang at 6:30 p.m. Marcus opened it to find Tom Kowalski, his elderly neighbor, looking nervous and apologetic. "Marcus, I need to talk to you about the HOA meeting tonight." "Come in, Tom." The older man stepped inside, his hands shaking slightly. "I want you to know, I never believed any of that nonsense about you being dangerous. But Karen, she's been calling everyone, telling them you're unstable, that you might retaliate against neighbors who don't support you." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What did she tell you?" "She said you have access to chemicals that could poison our water supply. She said you've been asking questions about home security systems because you're planning to break in and plant evidence. She said the police are investigating you for terrorism." "Tom, You know, that's insane. I know it's insane. But Marcus, she's convincing people. Mrs. Patterson is talking about moving. The Johnsons already put their house on the market, and the HOA board, they're scared. They're going to vote to fine you $10,000 for creating a public safety hazard. Marcus exchanged glances with Sarah. Tom, what do you know about Karen's finances? Her finances. I know she and her husband live pretty well for people who claim to be struggling with medical bills. Medical bills. That's how she justified the last special assessment. Said she needed emergency surgery, couldn't afford her HOA duties, needed to hire outside help. We all paid an extra $1,000. Tom's expression darkened. Funny. Thing is, I saw her playing tennis the day after her supposed surgery. Sarah pulled out her phone. Tom, would you be willing to testify to that? Because medical insurance fraud is a federal crime. At 7 p.m., Marcus and Sarah walked into the Willow Creek Community Center. The meeting room was packed with neighbors, most of whom avoided eye contact with Marcus. Karen sat at the front table with the other board members, looking composed and confident, despite being out on bail. Victoria Blackwood sat in the front row, her presence a clear intimidation tactic. Ladies and gentlemen, Karen began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. We're here tonight to address the serious safety concerns raised by recent events in our neighborhood, she gestured, toward Marcus. Dr. Chen's reckless handling of pool chemicals has created a public health emergency. The pink contamination in his pool represents a clear and present danger to our community's well-being. Marcus started to stand, but Sarah put a hand on his arm. Not yet, she whispered. The board has consulted with legal experts and environmental specialists, Karen continued. We've determined that a special assessment of $10,000 is necessary to fund ongoing safety monitoring and potential remediation of groundwater contamination. A murmur went through the crowd. $10,000 was more than most residents could afford. Furthermore, Karen's voice rose, we're implementing new community standards for residents who work with hazardous materials. Anyone whose profession involves access to dangerous chemicals will be required to undergo monthly safety inspections and carry additional liability insurance. Marcus felt his jaw clench. She was trying to force him out of the neighborhood entirely. Are there any questions? Karen asked, clearly expecting none. Marcus stood up. I have a question. The room fell silent. Karen's composed expression flickered for just a moment. Dr. Chen, given your current legal situation, my legal situation? Marcus's voice carried across the room with the authority of someone who'd testified in hundreds of trials. You mean the fact that you were arrested for vandalizing my property, the fact that you filed a false police report, the fact that you're currently out on bail? Victoria Blackwood started to stand, but Marcus continued. I have a question about these special assessments, Karen, specifically. I'd like to know why the emergency roof repair assessment from last year was paid to Henderson Construction Services, a company owned by your husband. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Karen's face went pale. I'd also like to know why the neighborhood security upgrade assessment was paid to Morrison Safety Systems, a company owned by your brother-in-law, who also happens to be the city building inspector who approved all these emergency repairs. Marcus pulled out a folder thick with documents. In fact, I'd like to know why 73% of all special assessments over the past 5 years have been paid to companies owned by members of your family. Karen's voice cracked. Those are baseless accusations, are they? Marcus? Open the folder, because I have bank records, property transfers, business licenses, and construction contracts that tell a very different story. I have documentation showing that you've been using this HOA as a personal ATM, fraudulently billing residents for work that was never done or done at massively inflated prices to benefit your family's businesses. The room was completely silent. Now, Marcus could see neighbors looking at each other with dawning realization. Dr. Chen, Victoria Blackwood's voice cut through the silence. You're making serious accusations without proper evidence. Ms. Blackwood, I'm a forensic scientist. Evidence is what I do. Marcus turned to face the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, your HOA president hasn't just been stealing from you, Shays, been systematically defrauding this community for years. The real question isn't whether I'm a danger to this neighborhood. The real question is why you've all been paying for Karen Henderson's family to get rich. Karen's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. "You can't prove any of this. You're just trying to deflect from your own crimes." Marcus smiled, pulling out his phone. "Actually, Karen, I can prove all of it, because unlike you, I understand that in the digital age, everything leaves a trail, and your trail leads straight to federal prison." He turned to address the room one final time. "The FBI Financial Crimes Unit will be here tomorrow morning. I suggest everyone start documenting exactly how much money you've paid in special assessments over the past 5 years, because you're all going to be witnesses in a federal fraud case." Karen Henderson's empire of lies was about to come crashing down, and Marcus Chen was going to be the one holding the sledgehammer. The security camera footage was crystal clear. Karen Henderson standing at the edge of Marcus's pristine pool at 3:47 a.m., dumping bottle after bottle of hot pink fabric dye into the water. But when confronted the next morning, she didn't just deny it, she called the police, claiming Marcus was trying to poison the entire neighborhood with toxic pool chemicals. What Karen didn't know was that Marcus had spent 15 years as a forensic chemist, and he was about to turn her own lies into the weapon that would destroy everything she'd built on deception. Marcus Chen pressed his face against the cool glass of his kitchen window, staring at what had once been his backyard oasis. The pool that had cost him $30,000 and 6 months of meticulous planning now resembled a giant bowl of Pepto-Bismol. The hot pink water so vibrant it seemed to glow in the early morning light. "This has to be a nightmare," he whispered, running his hands through his black hair. He'd worked double shifts for 2 years to afford this pool, dreaming of quiet evenings after his shifts at the crime lab, floating under the stars. Now it looked like someone had murdered a flamingo in his backyard. The doorbell rang with an aggressive urgency that made his stomach clench. Through the peephole, he saw Karen Henderson's sharp features twisted into her signature expression of righteous indignation. She wore her usual uniform, a crisp white blouse, khaki capris, and the kind of self-satisfied smirk that had made her the most hated person in Willow Creek subdivision. Marcus opened the door, already knowing this conversation would be an absurdity. "Marcus Chen," Karen announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been told no. "We need to talk about your pool situation." "My pool situation?" Marcus stepped onto his porch, closing the door behind him. "You mean the fact that someone turned it into a cotton candy nightmare?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "Don't play innocent with me. I've been researching pool chemicals all night, and that pink color is clearly the result of excessive chlorine mixing with copper sulfate. You've been over-treating your pool with dangerous chemicals, and now you're contaminating our entire neighborhood." Marcus blinked slowly, his forensic training kicking in. In 15 years of analyzing crime scenes, he'd encountered every type of liar. But Karen was a special breed. She delivered her fiction with the conviction of a televangelist. "Karen, that's not how pool chemistry works. Don't you dare lecture me about science." She cut him off, jabbing her finger toward his chest. "I have a degree in business administration. I know chemical reactions when I see them. That pink color is proof that your negligence is putting our children at risk." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "What children, Karen? The subdivision is mostly retirees and young professionals. The closest thing to children around here are your 3 cats. Mr. Peterson's grandchildren visit every summer," she snapped, "and the Johnsons are trying to get pregnant. Your toxic pool is probably already affecting their fertility." The absurdity hit Marcus like a physical blow. Here was a woman who'd spent the last 6 months complaining about everything from his choice of mailbox color to the aggressive nature of his hedge trimming, now standing on his porch, accusing him of environmental terrorism. "Karen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is your belief that you can poison our neighborhood without consequences." Karen pulled out her phone with theatrical flourish. "I'm calling the police right now, and the EPA and Channel 7 News. This ends today." Marcus watched her dial 911 with the fervor of someone reporting a terrorist attack. He could hear her voice rising as she spoke to the dispatcher, describing a chemical spill emergency and demanding immediate response from hazmat teams. "Yes, that's right," Karen continued, her voice carrying across the quiet morning air. "Pink contamination. Toxic fumes. My neighbor has been conducting illegal chemical experiments in his backyard pool. As Karen painted her picture of environmental disaster, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down had come outside to collect her newspaper, but instead of her usual friendly wave, she looked at Marcus with genuine fear before hurrying back inside. The Hendersons' next-door neighbor, old Mr. Kowalski, was standing in his driveway, cell phone pressed to his ear, gesturing toward Marcus's house with obvious agitation. Karen was destroying his reputation in real time, and she was doing it with the confidence of someone who'd never faced consequences for her actions. "The police are on their way," Karen announced, ending her call, "along with the fire department and environmental services. I hope you have a good lawyer, Marcus, because what you've done here is criminal." Marcus felt something snap inside him. For 6 months, he'd endured Karen's complaints with polite professionalism. When she'd called the city about his non-regulation fence height, he'd had it surveyed and adjusted. When she'd reported his excessive barbecue smoke, he'd switched to an electric grill. When she'd accused his sprinkler system of creating mosquito breeding grounds, he'd installed an expensive filtration system. But this was different. This was character assassination. "Karen," Marcus said quietly, his voice taking on the controlled tone he used when testifying in court. "I want to be very clear about something. I've been nothing but respectful to you since I moved in. I've accommodated every complaint, addressed every concern, and treated you with more patience than you've ever deserved." Karen's smirk faltered slightly. "But this," Marcus continued, gesturing toward his pool, "this crosses a line that you can't uncross. Because here's what's about to happen. The authorities are going to test my pool water, and they're going to discover that it contains fabric dye, specifically RIT all-purpose dye in fuchsia fantasy. They're going to find no trace of the chemicals you've described, because those chemicals don't exist in my pool." The color drained from Karen's face. "And then," Marcus said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "they're going to ask how I know so much about chemical analysis, and I'm going to tell them that I've spent 15 years as a forensic chemist specializing in trace evidence analysis. I'm going to tell them that I can determine the exact brand, color, and purchase date of the dye in my pool. And then I'm going to show them something that's going to make this the worst day of your life." Karen's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. "Because you see, Karen, I have security cameras, 4 of them, all activated, all recording in high definition. And they captured something very interesting at 3:47 a.m. this morning." The sound of sirens began to wail in the distance, growing closer. "So here's what's going to happen," Marcus continued, his voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "When the police arrive, I'm going to show them the footage of you dumping 8 bottles of pink dye into my pool. Then I'm going to press charges for vandalism, trespassing, and filing a false police report. And then I'm going to sue you for defamation. You just spent 15 minutes telling our entire neighborhood that I'm a criminal." Karen's face had gone completely white. "You ... you can't." "I was just trying to ... trying to what, Karen? Destroy my property? Ruin my reputation? Turn my neighbors against me?" The sirens were getting closer now, and Marcus could see the flashing lights at the end of the street. "Here's the thing about lies, Karen," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years of courtroom testimony. "They always leave evidence. And I'm very, very good at finding evidence." The police cars pulled into his driveway just as Karen's legs gave out and she collapsed onto his porch steps, the full weight of her situation finally hitting her. Marcus looked down at the woman who'd made his life miserable for 6 months, and for the first time since moving to Willow Creek, he smiled. The game was about to begin, and Karen had just discovered she'd been playing with a master.